Hey folks, this is Scott with SimpleSpider.com. Today we'll be installing Oracle Linux 6 on VirtualBox. So we're going to start up our VirtualBox and say New. We're going to choose a name for this instance. And you can see right away it chose, because I chose the name Oracle Linux, it picked Linux as the type. It picked Oracle and 64 since I put 64 in the name. We're going to click Next. And it's going to ask us how big do we want the memory size to be. I'm going to make it 4 gigs in size. It's going to ask us to create a virtual drive now. We're going to say yes, we want to create a virtual drive, and we're going to use the default VirtualBox image. Say next, and then we're going to dynamically allocate it rather than have a fixed size. We'll say next, and we're going to make this about 50 gigs in size. After we've actually created the instance, we're going to go ahead and configure the ISO. So we're going to go to Settings, and we're going to choose Storage, and we're going to see here that we have no images loaded, so we're going to say Choose a Disk. Here I've already downloaded the Linux 6 disks, so I'm going to pick the Linux 6 disk and remove the other disk, and I'm going to say OK. From here I'm just going to choose to, actually before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and change the CPU settings. Here we're going to go to Systems, and we're going to choose Processor, and we're going to change it to 2 CPUs. If you've only got one CPU, this will work fine on 512 meg of memory and one CPU, depending on what type of install you're doing. In my case, I'm going to do it in a base install that I'm going to be reused for several things. I'm going to reuse it for a database, an application server, a subversion server, an HTTP server, whatever I want to do with it, and I'll just be to modify this. And I'm going to say OK here, and I'm going to go ahead and just start this instance. This is a fairly standard install. I'm going to do a very basic install so that I can add the packages that I want as I go. I'm going to choose Install or Upgrade and hit the Enter button. It's going to ask me if I want to check this disk. I've already checked the disk, but it's a good idea to go ahead and check the disk if it's the first time you're installing it. So I'm going to go ahead and say skip. It'll only take about 3 or 4 minutes for it to check the disk usually. I'm running off an ISO image rather than a CD, so it's just a downloaded image from the Oracle site. And it's going to come up with basically the welcome screen, and I'm going to say next. And it's going to ask me what language, and I'm going to say English, and which keyboard, also English. Basic storage device, I say next, and it's going to say do I want to discard all my data or keep the data that I have. I'm going to go ahead and discard all data. Here I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to go ahead and leave the network configuration. We'll change those later. Say next. I'm going to leave this alone also. The time zone is good for me, and I'm going to add a password in. If you don't add a strong enough password, it's actually going to pop up and ask you to put in a stronger password or continue. I'm going to say go ahead and use all the space on this 50 gigs. That's not going to allocate it because I've set it dynamic. I'm going to review and modify the partitioning layout. In my case, this is the layout I want. It's given me 4 gigs of swap. It's given me 46 gigs of slash. I'm going to leave that alone. If I want to add more applications into other areas, I'll actually drop another disk onto this, add a disk. 4 gigs is a good starting point for my swap here. So I'm just going to go ahead and say next. It says do I want to format this, and I'm going to say yes, I do want to format it. And it's going to say write changes to the disk. So if you're working with the Oracle database, you may actually want to have 10 gigs of swap space, and you may want to actually have it as a partition. We can set a bootloader password. This would be for security. A little bit. Use the tab buttons here. And we just hit space, and it's going to say what's the password. Also set a strong enough password that Somebody's not going to be able to come into my system. And I'm going to say OK. And yes, I do want it to load to that sector. I'm going to say next. And now it says, what do I want to install? I'm not even going to install a basic server. I'm going to install a minimal server. So I'm going to go down here to minimal, and I'm going to say minimal. That's going to give me the least amount of software packages installed initially. And the benefit for this is that I can install whichever packages I want once it's started up. I'm going to say next. There's a lot of security reasons why you'll want to go with a minimal install and not just install any packages that exists out there. There's thousands of Linux packages that could install. This is very basic. It's going to install 257 packages. It's not even going to install the desktop for me, so I'm not going to have a graphical interface when I first start up. But this is okay for what I'm going to be doing with it. For a lot of the software that I install on Linux, I don't use a graphical interface. When I get into the database, Oracle database, sometimes Oracle application server. In either of those cases, there are some benefits to use the graphical interface just because the standard installer for Oracle database and Oracle application server is a graphical interface installer. This doesn't mean that you have to have a graphical interface to do it. Of course, the more packages you have, the more risk you have for security. So I always say start out at the basic, nothing installed on it, and add the packages that you absolutely need as you need them. You can standardize this, so if I say, hey, I want a database, I can write a standardized script to say when I put up a database, I'm going to go ahead and install the desktop, I'm going to go ahead and install VNC Viewer. And that's not the only way you could do this. I'm just saying that these you can standardize the packages that you're going to put on, but then you have a base install here with nothing on it so that it has the least security risks by having your minimal install. This went pretty quick. It depends on your disk speed. It depends a little bit on your whether or not you're using a DVD drive versus a ISO drive, downloaded drive. Either one will work fine, but your performance will depend on both of those components. Oracle Linux 6 is a base off of Red Hat. It's a repackaged Red Hat installation. So if any of the instructions here should convert over to either Red Hat or CentOS. They may not convert over to SUSE or Debian Linux, but most of your other Linuxes, the same syntax that we do in most of the videos here will be the same. Actually, most of these screens will look very similar to the Red Hat install screens if you're doing Red Hat. Now, one of the nice things about Oracle Linux 6 is that as of version 6, they have a publicly available free library for your downloads so that you don't actually have to license this to test this out and play around with this to get your patch sets and be patched up. You don't have to worry about having an unpatched system when you're testing. You can actually patch up and test your patches on a Linux 6 environment. Some of your other flavors, like Red Hat, actually have a licensing cost. Even for the public libraries. For this, you'll have no licensing cost unless you move up to the next level, which is the ULN. The ULN level is about $140 right now. I'm going to go ahead and reboot the system. The ULN gives you patches from their ULN, and it also gives you some other repositories that are Oracle-specific libraries. There's a couple other. There's a Premier and a Limited support. Both will work with a couple processors or a couple CPUs in the system, and they start somewhere between $4.99 and $13.99. Again, they do provide then the Oracle packages. A couple packages that are nice is the Oracle OCFS2, which is a clustered file system, and the ASM libraries. There are workarounds to use this without these components to set up the Oracle database with ASM using some other methods. But these are nice libraries to have, so they're worth paying for the extra Oracle libraries if you're actually setting up an Oracle database. If you want to get support and actual technical support where you can go into the website, you actually have to move up to their Limited or Premier Edition, a little bit higher versions of the Oracle licensing. But for your base version for testing, you can just start right here at this Oracle Linux download from the public website. I'm going to put out on the website the links to get to the download sites, but this is the basic install, and this is all you need to do to get a basic install. Again, this is Scott from SimpleSpider.com. Go out and check out the tutorials out there. They'll walk you through setting up different environments, database environments, application server environments. And this is just the base install of Oracle Linux. Okay, thanks guys.